Let's get started. Welcome everybody from Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. We're so happy to have this workshop for you regarding the clinical track. I am the program manager, Deneen Lancaster. I work in Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, Faculty Affairs Department. I would like to introduce Beverly Payne. She could give us a wave. She got hired almost 2 years ago. And I was so happy when she came aboard. And then we were so grateful to be able to also hire someone else, Tina Patrandi O'Neill. She's giving a wave right now. So the three of us, along with the Associate Dean, Jean Barnett, are in charge of the Faculty Affairs Department. And so all your questions, whenever you send them, we prefer, rather than sending us to one of us directly, that you send it to Faculty Affairs CCLCM at ccf.org. And one of us three, usually Tina, will answer it. And if she can't answer it, she'll send it to Bev or myself. Or, you know, if we ever need to, we do contact Case for information from them as well. But we like everything to go through our office. So this workshop is about getting started in the clinical track. And I am gonna go ahead and move to our first slide. So we are partnered with Case. So the college opened in 2004. I think it was 2002 when Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine began with a $100 million gift from the Lerner family. So because of that gift, none of our medical students pay any cost for their schooling. They still have to pay for room and board wherever they live in the Cleveland area, but there's no tuition cost for the degree. It's a 5-year degree, and we're partnered with Case Western Reserve. So we are not a college that stands on its own. We are with Case Western. So there's a few rules we can do on our own, but the majority of everything that we follow or ask you to do is because it's in the Case bylaws or faculty handbook. We also have an accrediting body. They accredit Case Western and us being under Case to make sure that our medical school conforms to all the standards for a medical degree in the US or Canada. So a lot of times items that we're taking care of are because of our accreditation. So it's important that we make sure we're fulfilling those obligations as well. So some people may ask, why pursue a faculty appointment with us? There's reasons listed here. It's a rank that knows around the world that you've earned it. So it's unlike a hospital title that you may have. This one, because it's academic, it reaches across the world. So it's important, we believe, to get a faculty appointment. A lot of times you can't get a grant without a faculty appointment, and it just lets you get more involved in academic medicine and get credit for all the work you are doing. So we think there's a lot of benefits to it. So when you do join, there are, become a faculty member, there are some benefits through Case. Now you're still a Cleveland, for most of you, you're a consultant with the Abu Dhabi institution, not necessarily Cleveland Clinic employees. But when you get a faculty appointment, it doesn't change your employer. So there's only a few benefits from Case. You don't get the benefits that their employees would get because you're not one, but there are some benefits. So if you're in Cleveland, you can get an ID card. No matter where you're at, you will get an email address that's an EDU email, and you'll get network access to some Case benefits in their network. If you're in Cleveland, you can use the gym. There are discounts at the bookstore. I'm not sure if those are available online or not. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people in Abu Dhabi would like to use the case libraries, but that is only available to Ohio faculty. And the reason for that is there's very expensive licenses for these journals, and they're only good for people in the state of Ohio. It doesn't, if they got them for international, they couldn't afford the cost of the license. So we still encourage you to use the Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi library for your journal access. But you can network with other faculty members because now you are all faculty under CASE and CCLCM. So at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, the majority of the people over there, you really work for the hospital, not for Cleveland Clinic, you're consultants. So because of that, you're allowed appointments in what we call the clinical track. CASE calls it part-time. It's either the clinical or the adjunct track. There are a few people in Abu Dhabi that are Cleveland Clinic staff members, and they would be able to choose whatever rank they would like, and whatever track. But for 95% of the wonderful staff members in Abu Dhabi, you will be choosing from the clinical track. And that's for all our academic departments, except the two that fall under adjunct. And those are biomedical engineering and molecular medicine. And I don't believe there's anybody in Abu Dhabi who has chosen either of those two academic departments. Here in Cleveland, the only ones that choose adjunct are people in the Lerner Research Institute. So we probably won't see any adjunct, but in the clinical track, we have 4 ranks that we use. Clinical professor is the highest. Then we have clinical associate professor, clinical assistant professor, and one called clinical instructor. We just started using clinical instructor. It's the only rank that you don't need a nomination letter for. A year ago or less, clinical assistant was easier to get. Not for Abu Dhabi, you always needed nomination letters, but things changed at CASE. And now clinical instructor is the only one that you don't need a nomination letter, and it's easier to get it. It's a little quicker. But we don't really recommend it. We recommend going clinical assistant professor for your entry level rank. So one of the tools we have online that we encourage people to use is our comparison tool.
Deneen, I'm sorry
yes.
to interrupt. There was a message in the chat and just wanted to bring your attention to it in case it references what we just went over before going forward.
Sure.
Did you want me to read it? Did you want me to read it, or did you want to take a look?
Go ahead.
Okay, so it says this is from Dr. Al-Mala. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. We have a new field now too that has phonetics so that we can now pronounce your names correctly. So my apologies if I incorrectly pronounce that. One of the major disadvantages is limited access to grants and other faculty research activities, and we are not allowed to be represented at the college senates and committees. Is that going to change in the near future? He is currently a clinical professor too, so thank you for having an appointment as well.
Right. That will probably not change. So when you get a faculty appointment, our college doesn't actually have any grants that we are in charge of. So grants are done from societies or the government, and that that has nothing to do with the college. So we can't help you with that. If you're not allowed to apply for grants because the grant won't let you with a clinical appointment, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to help you with that. Regarding serving for governance, unfortunately at CASE, there is not a lot of positions in governance that someone in the clinical track is allowed to partake in. There are a few faculty representative positions, I think it's 3, that come open every 3 years that are available to someone in the clinical track. And those 3 positions are case-wide, meaning somebody from UH could apply for them, somebody from the VA, Metro, something like that. So unfortunately, you can't serve as a regular faculty council representative because you must be in the regular track for that. Committee-wise at CASE, I would say 95% at least, you must be in the regular track to be on a committee. So there is very limited governance opportunities for someone in the clinical track. Unfortunately, we can't do anything about that because we go by CASE rules. And these CASE rules are not just for the School of Medicine, they're for all of Case Western, meaning their engineering school, their nursing school, their arts and sciences school. So there's not a lot we can do about that. Okay, that was a good one. All right, so our comparison tool table here, you would go to this online and you would click on the clinical adjunct track, that's the bottom bar, and this is what would come up. These are the clinical tracks, clinical ranks inside the clinical track. I know it's hard to read here, but if you go to the site, it will let you know the approximate time frame for the appointment to be finished. And these are approximate. So if all goes well, an application for clinical associate professor could be done from the time you hit submit to the time you get final approval in 6 to 8 months. That's an average though. We've seen them get approved in 4 or 5 months if all the letters came in quickly and everything moved really quickly. And we've seen them unfortunately take over a year, a lot of times not due to anything we've done, but things get stalled at CASE sometimes. So once your application gets sent over to CASE for final approval, we really can't do much to help that application. We check on applications when we think they're taking too long. We keep numerous lists to keep track of what we sent over there. And so anything that's going on more than, like for clinical associate professor, anything that's been at CASE like 3 months or 4, we start asking what's going on. You know, is there a problem with this one? You know, once in a while they'll say, oh my gosh, you know, we need assistance on that one or something. But normally it's just because it hasn't been approved yet by the dean or the assistant dean. So this will help you see, clinical instructor, you see that you hardly need anything in the columns going down. You don't need a nomination letter, but you can see in the higher ranks that you need more items. All right. So let's talk a little more about clinical track applications. So the clinical track is for those that do less than 50%, and that's regard to academic medicine. So they're more focused on patient-centered medicine. They do some teaching, probably some research and some professional service, but they probably don't do it as much or as often as somebody in the regular track. Now, for you staff at Abu Dhabi, you know, you can only choose the clinical track, but this is what CASE says people in the clinical track usually are focused on. So we encourage you to come in with your initial application at the rank you are qualified for. So if you look at the requirements checklist and you see that you have a regional reputation, which for Abu Dhabi would be the nearby Middle East, you would say, okay, I have that kind of reputation. I'm going to immediately apply for clinical associate professor. You do not need to come in at clinical assistant professor if you already have a reputation higher than that. But once you get in, say you do pick clinical assistant professor because you don't have a lot of items on your CV yet in teaching, research, or professional service. Once you come in at clinical assistant professor, you're going to have to go through the ranks. That is a newer change. Before, you could skip clinical associate and go right to clinical professor, but you cannot promote like that anymore. You must go through the ranks. So promotions are when you move up to the next rank. So if you're a clinical assistant professor currently, you would promote to clinical associate professor. That's the difference between a new appointment and a promotion. There's no deadlines. We take applications all year long. Our committees run all year long, and we review everything every day throughout the year. And just a reminder that all our ranks are non-tenured. Even if you were allowed in the regular track, they're always non-tenured. So the reputation requirements for clinical track. This is the most important thing you would look at when you're deciding what rank to apply for. The most important thing is, do you have the reputation? So it's important to have that reputation. That's the only thing CASE talks about in their handbook and bylaws is reputation. So that's why it's so important. So you'd look at our requirements checklist at the information, and you would look, and you have your chair look at your CV and see if your accomplishments prove that you have the reputation. So what do I mean by that? When Bev or Tina and I review an application and we look at the CV, we're looking to see where that reputation is, and how we see that is by what you've done. So if you've done a lot, but it's all at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. So say you give lectures, you run the department, you've done all these great things, you know, increase patient satisfaction, all that, but you only do it within Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi or Cleveland Clinic at large, then that is only a local reputation. And then you could only apply for clinical assistant professor. If when you're looking at your CV, you see that you spoke in nearby countries, or you did lectures that were for a regional audience, like it was held at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, but people from Oman or other countries around you were invited, then you would say that's regional. Because, you know, because the United Arab Emirates is smaller, unfortunately, we can't say that if you gave a lecture to all the doctors in the country, that would be national. Unfortunately, that's just regional. And a few surrounding countries are regional. To get a national reputation in Abu Dhabi, you would need more of the Middle East. You know, you had somebody, it was open to a Middle East society meeting, or you know, went to Saudi Arabia to speak, or India, or something like that, or, you know, the US, not Cleveland Clinic, but somewhere in the US. That would mean you had like a national reputation or international. That's what you need for clinical professor then. So for clinical associate, you need a regional, and for clinical professor, you need a national. And if you were in Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, our regional is the surrounding states. So if you had a reputation for speaking in Indiana, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, a Midwest conference, that is what you would need in Cleveland to have a regional reputation. So we've kind of just used that as a reference for Abu Dhabi. And these are accomplishments that you're getting. They're since your last appointment or promotion. So what that means is if you already have a faculty appointment and you want to promote, you need new accomplishments since the last time you had an appointment. You can, if you got appointed in 2016 as a clinical assistant professor, when you're looking back at your accomplishments to see if you have the reputation that's required, you're looking back to 2016 and sooner. You're not going back to before 2016. Those accomplishments were already looked at when you received clinical assistant professor. So it's new accomplishments that we're looking for. And, you know, the time doesn't matter. We have some people that say, well, it's been 6 years since I became clinical assistant professor. I must be ready for clinical associate professor. Time doesn't matter. It's that reputation. So that's the most important. So the next item you'll need is a chair nomination letter. Choose the chair that knows you best. I just had somebody in Cleveland here emailing me this morning asking if they should pick their department chair or institute chair. And what I tell them is pick who knows you best. And most likely that's your department chair. If your institute's very large, you probably do not want to pick your institute chair because they're not going to know you as well. And we don't mind who you pick. The only requirement that we have is that your chair should be in the same department as you. If you're in, say, radiology, you would not ask a dermatologist to write your letter for you. So now I know sometimes institute chairs may cover a bunch of departments, but you know, if you pick in a department chair, they most likely should be in the same academic department as you. So we're talking CCLCM departments. You know, we have, we're going to have 22 departments. We have about 20 right now. We're opening up the last 2. So if you look and your chair, you could go to our website and see what your chair's faculty appointment is. If they don't have one, then don't worry about it. But if they do, and their academic appointment is, say, clinical professor of dermatology, and you want to apply in radiology, you should not be asking them to write your letter. So you request your letter within the application. That hasn't changed. And the letter is confidential. And the chair will be sent instructions on what we would like to see in the letter. When your chair is writing your letter, you know, if it's for clinical assistant professor, they don't need as long of a letter. If you're applying for clinical associate professor or clinical professor, the letter should be more substantial. I know you won't see it, but if your chair ever asks you, or you are a chair listening to this workshop, then it should be more substantial. If you're applying in the lower ranks, then the letter clinical assistant professor could be shorter. And your chair cannot also serve as your colleague. So think about it. If your chair wrote your nomination letter, you don't want them to write another letter as a colleague. So don't use your chair twice. The next thing that's needed is a CV. And so when you apply in the clinical track, we allow you to use any format of CV you would like. Please look at the requirements checklist to see the few hints we have. And I would like to also suggest that you do look at our CV template. You're not required to use our CCLCM template. But if you look at it, you may see some of the categories that we ask for, and you may end up putting more information on your CV than you would have. You may look at it and go, oh, I didn't know that was important, like who I've mentored. Yes, I have trainees that I've mentored. I never thought of putting that on my CV, but it's on the template. I better include it. So it could be a great jumping off point for knowing what to put in your CV. Because we like to say that everything really counts. You shouldn't be leaving things off. And then it should be neat and include past accomplishments and current ones. Just because you're applying for a promotion and nothing on your CV is going to count from before your last appointment, say in 2016, it doesn't mean you delete it. you leave it on there. But what we're going to be looking at is the newer accomplishments. All right, the next item is personal statement. So your personal statement, we abbreviate it PS, your personal statement should be understood by a layperson. So the committee that's going to review your application, if you're applying in the senior rank of clinical associate professor or clinical professor, there's going to be people on this committee reviewing your packet that will not be in your department. So you may have a dermatologist reviewing your pathology appointment. So because of that, you're not going to want to use abbreviations and specialty jargon that they're not going to understand. They're all smart. They're all PhDs or MDs or DOs. But if they're not in your area of expertise, you can't expect them to understand all the acronyms and everything. So spell it out. And, you know, include information that maybe we don't see in the CV. Like say you won an award. We don't know if that award is handed out 40 times per year or once every 3 years to the top person in your area. So that's a good time to explain in your personal statement anything you've done that wouldn't be as evident on your CV. So it's good to put more detail in. And a new thing that's happening, and part of it's on the requirements right now, but we're updating them in the next week or so. There's going to be a separate personal statement template. So what we've found is the review committee really relies on the personal statement a lot of times to have the candidate prove that they have the reputation. You can see it on the CV, but they're backing it up on their personal statement by saying, I've been invited to these lectures. I've been asked to teach this course, maybe by an industry company, because I'm an expert in my field. And so the personal statement really needs to spell it out exactly how you've reached that reputation. And we were finding that a lot of personal statements weren't doing that. So we've created a template for the regular track and the clinical track. You would use the clinical track one. It's going to be embedded in the requirements checklist. And you're just going to follow that to really spell out exactly how you meet the requirement. And so that's something new, but we really think it'll be helpful and avoid a lot of questions by the committee and make your application move along quickly. All right, colleague referees. When you apply in the clinical track, there's only 2 ranks that require referees, and that's clinical associate professor and clinical professor. And so you must have referees. Now, it's not like the regular track where you need external referees. These are all called colleague referees. So you're going to put in 8 names. And they can be national or international, that's fine. And, you know, everything I'm talking about is in the requirements checklist too. I think everything I've touched on has been in there. That's why they're so long, but they have a lot of good detailed information. But these referees can know you, or if they don't know you, that's okay too. But 4 of them must be from outside Cleveland Clinic, CCLCM or Case Western. They really should be outside of your immediate area too. You would not want to pick all your outside referees from the city of Abu Dhabi if they're at a different hospital. That would not be a strong application. So you can pick people you used to work with or trained with, or somebody you met at a conference, or somebody that you wrote a paper with. You are allowed to know them, but 4 must be from outside. And this is the same for clinical associate professor as well as clinical professor. There's no difference. So they should be able to vouch for your reputation. Something new is that they're going to receive your CV and personal statement. So if they don't know you as well, they're going to be able to look at your CV, see what you've done, read your personal statement, and say, oh, yes, this person does have a regional reputation or a national reputation. And then hopefully they're going to write that in their letter. More information's in the requirements checklist. And our final count that we need to move you along in the application process is 5 letters. A minimum of 2 must be from outside CCLCM. So let's say that you decide out of your 8 names that you're going to put 6 from outside and only 2 from inside to make the 8. That's okay. But we just need a minimum of 2 from outside. If we get 5 from outside, that's okay. We'll use them. Or if we get more than 5 letters, we'll still use them. What we can't do is move your application along with, say, 4 inside and 1 outside. Even though you have the total of 5, you don't have them from the right sources. So we have to wait to get another letter from an outside person. So we ask for more names than we need. And sometimes after we email them, we have a system that automatically emails them 4 times every 32 days, up to 4 times. If at the end of the 3rd time, we still haven't gotten your 5 letters, you're going to receive an automatic email from our office saying, it's probably a good time to put in a few more names right now. Now, after we email them the 4th time, and that's the final, you'll receive another email that says, you really need to put in some other names. And this is no reflection on you, because a lot of times people just aren't able to write. We get a lot of emails from referees saying, my, son's getting married, or my wife just had surgery, or, something's happened and I can't write a letter. And it's no reflection on you. They're just not able to. Or they'll say, I'm applying for a grant. Can you get back to me in like 5 months? Well, we'd rather not wait that long. So this is why we need extra names sometimes. And you know what? You can put in more names in the beginning if you want. 8 are required. You want to put in 10 names, believe me, we won't stop you. That would be fine. But sometimes we do have to come back and ask for extra names.
Janine,
Yes.
Dr. Khan is asking, does the referee need to be from your own specialty?
They should be. It would be, I like analogies. So it'd be like asking a wrestler to talk about swimming. You probably wouldn't do that. You probably wouldn't ask a wrestler if a swimmer is a good swimmer. You would ask somebody who swims. So you should be, because you're allowed to know them, you should be able to find people in your subspecialty or your special, if you're a pediatric liver transplant doctor and you can't think of enough names, you could just go to pediatric doctors, or you could just go to adult liver transplant because they would still understand. But you should not go to a dermatologist, because they're not going to understand pediatric liver transplants.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Alizani is asking, when we say 4 referees have to be from outside Cleveland Clinic, does this include Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi?
Yes. So when we say outside of Cleveland Clinic, we mean all of Cleveland Clinic. You can't pick anybody from Lou Revo, from Florida, from Ohio, none of that, because those are inside. So you can't pick anybody from Case. So Case would mean you can't pick anybody at UH Hospital in Cleveland, Metro Hospital in Cleveland, or the VA Hospital in Cleveland. And you, again, shouldn't really pick anybody right in Abu Dhabi either, because that's local. So if there's somebody in another city in the United Arab Emirates at a different hospital, that you could, but you wouldn't pick somebody down the street at a competing hospital, because that's really just still local. Okay. Any more, Beth? Okay.
That's all for now. Sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you. All right, promotion. So new appointments are when you're coming in new. It doesn't mean you're new. Maybe you've been at Abu Dhabi 6 years already and you just never applied. But when you're applying for the first time in a track, the clinical track, that's a new appointment. Whether you pick clinical assistant professor, clinical associate professor, or clinical professor, it's a new appointment. Now, if you pick clinical assistant professor or clinical associate for that new appointment, when you want to move up in the future, that's going to be called a promotion. And as I mentioned before, you can't skip. If you're a clinical assistant, you can't go right away to clinical professor anymore. And you can promote when you're ready. So say you've just had a spectacular 2 years where you've written papers, lectured, just done, you're now like the treasurer of a regional anesthesia society, and you've just really done a lot. Then maybe you're ready in 2 years to promote. Again, you got to look last time you got an appointment to now. Do you have a reputation with the new items on your CV? The average time is more like 4 to 8 years. There's people that do it in 2, there's people that do it in 12, but the average is about 4 to 8 years. But again, it's whenever you're ready. And the requirements are the same. If you're promoting or a new appointment, it doesn't matter. What you have to put on your in your application is all the same. What matters is this reputation. So new appointments and promotions, they're the same. There's no difference in what's required. Okay, so 4 steps to apply. It's so easy. All you have to do is pick your faculty rank. Now you can use that comparison tool I mentioned. You can definitely, we encourage you to speak with your chair. And if after doing both of those, you're still not sure if you have the reputation or not, you can always email us at Faculty Affairs. We'll look over your CV and we'll run it by our Associate Dean, Dr. Jean Barnett, and we'll let you know our recommendation. We would also want to know your primary area of excellence. I haven't discussed that. I should put a slide in for that. I don't.
Before we go on, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Before we go on, we have one more question regarding the referees.
Sure.
Kelly is asking, do the referees have to have a faculty appointment?
They do not. It's in the requirements checklist that it's preferred but not required. So they do not have to.
And then there was 2 other things too, backtracking to the CV, just to touch upon to ensure that the professional academic appointments be separate and not in the same section. That's been new and updated with case.
Yes.
And then also I didn't know if you wanted to touch upon also with clinical instructor with emeritus. With
What do you mean?
people,
Oh,
with people
yes. I'll get to
considering that rank. Okay,
Yes, I'll get to that one.
that was
Yes,
a side chat, so I wanted to make sure I brought those up randomly.
Thank you. Yes, on your CV, the new thing that CASE wants, and again, we have to follow their rules. Most of their rules we think are a good idea, but we do have to follow them no matter what, is on your CV, when you're listing your professional appointments, that would be, I'm a staff member of Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, or I used to be director of a clinic somewhere else. Professional appointments, medical, usually all of them are. They want academic appointments separated. So say you used to be an assistant professor somewhere or an instructor or anything academic, they want those in a separate section. Of course, if you're promoting, you would currently have an appointment with us, so you would need to have that listed. Because you're in the clinical track, you're allowed to have other faculty appointments outside. So say you have a faculty appointment at an institution, an academic institution in Abu Dhabi or a neighboring country, you're allowed to still have that and apply with us. You would just make sure you list that under academic appointments on your CV.
And then we have one more question that just came through too. How about if you were holding an appointment at Case Western for 2 years as clinical assistant before and you rejoin again, can you get promoted right away?
Yeah, you would make sure you have that listed on your CV. And then you would see if you have the requirements to choose a higher rank now. So clinical associate professor requires a regional reputation. So do you have that? And it's from, if you're new to Abu Dhabi, Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, you could have a regional reputation somewhere else. Say you're from Spain and you had a reputation in Spain, Portugal, and France. That would be considered a regional reputation. And when you come to Abu Dhabi, you would say, okay, I have a regional reputation. I'm going to apply for clinical associate professor. You're going to explain that in your personal statement that I do have a regional reputation. It was from where I formerly worked, which was, I wouldn't apply 4 years after you get to Abu Dhabi and say you have a regional reputation in Spain, because they're going to wonder, what have you done lately? It's never good to apply for a faculty appointment when you're in a downslope. I haven't written papers. I haven't lectured in 4 years. It's best to apply right away when you're more near the top. So you would apply and you would put in your personal statement. I'm new to Abu Dhabi, Cleveland Clinic, and I come from Spain. And there I had a regional reputation because I've lectured here. People would refer patients to me from France. I was on the board of a society journal for Spain or wherever it was at, and you would prove that you have that regional reputation. I hope that answers it. All right, let me finish up with this, and then we'll see if we have any more questions. But you're going to figure out what rank, and we prefer you try to figure it out first, because that's a really good way to look at your CV and see if you're noticing things. If you notice that all your lectures that are at Abu Dhabi, or when you lectured outside the country, it was at a Cleveland Clinic location, then you probably don't have a regional reputation. You only have a local. So anyhow, you're going to choose your rank, then you're going to log in, create an account, and start your application. We don't suggest that you start collecting your documents and wait to start the application. It's best to start it right away. Things make more sense when you're looking at your online application. And then instead of storing documents or referee names, you can just put them right in your application right when you get them. You're, of course, in your application going to request your nomination letter. And then once everything's complete in your application, step 4 is you're going to hit submit. A few times a year, we get people who wonder why their application is not going anywhere. And it turns out they never hit submit. And our office has over 200 submitted applications we are working on. So if you don't hit submit, we're never going to see it. We don't look at applied. We only look at submitted. So make sure you hit that submit button. If you hit it and something pops up in red, that means something's missing. Maybe your nomination letter wasn't put in yet. Maybe you only put in 7 referees instead of 8. You can look, find out what's wrong, correct it, and hit submit. So once you hit submit, then yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. There are 3 questions that came through. Do you want to wait until later or address them now?
Are they regarding all the, yeah, we'll address them now. That's fine.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm following with what's working for you. Okay. So, did we just get a 4th one? Oh, wow. We have 4. Okay. Bev, you can jump in. I could do the first 2 if you want to do the last 2. What's the difference between clinical or adjunct when choosing a promotion to associate professor?
And you're going to get these slides in a few days after this meeting. We're going to send our contacts at Abu Dhabi an email with everything attached, and they're going to forward it to everybody. But in the very beginning, I said that adjunct was only for biomedical engineering and molecular medicine. A lot of colleges use adjunct as somebody who's not there that often or filling a small role. Case Western Reserve does not use the word adjunct in those ways. It's only for people that are in the sciences, which is molecular medicine and biomedical engineering.
Okay, question 2 is what about virtual international and regional meetings? Would that count as regional as well? COVID time, smiley face.
Yes, virtual is still a meeting. What makes a meeting regional, national, or international, which you're going to want to put on your CV. You're not just going to want to list them all. You're either going to break them down into international, national, regional, and local, or you're going to put next to them national meeting. What makes it a meeting is who's invited. If I only invite Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, or say I invite Cleveland Clinic main campus anesthesiologist to a meeting I'm having virtually, that's a local meeting. If I invite people from around the country of the United Arab Emirates and adjoining countries, that's a regional meeting. Or even just the whole of United Arab Emirates, that's a regional meeting. If we've invited people from nationally, like which for Abu Dhabi would be the surrounding Middle East, or internationally, that's an international meeting. It can still be held in Abu Dhabi, but it's who you invited. That's what makes a meeting have these different designations of who, you know, either national, or regional, national, or international. So that's why you have to spell it out. If we see a lecture in Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, we're going to assume that only Abu Dhabi people were invited, Cleveland Clinic. And so we're going to assume that should be local. If you invited a bunch of people from all over, then you need to either say it was an international meeting held at Abu Dhabi or put it under a subheading of international. Okay, go ahead, Tina.
Okay, question 3, does Case Western or UH alumni get any preference, especially those with previous clinical rank at Case?
Nobody gets any, if you're talking about faculty appointments, no, there's no preference. There's, everybody's on a level playing field. Yeah.
Okay.
And we can't rush anything either. We can't, you know, we can't rush. So, you know, if you need an application by a certain date, let us know and we can tell you about other ways, like a temporary appointment, but we can't rush the normal process. Starting to lose my voice here. Go ahead, Tina.
Testing those vocal cords. Okay, what happens if someone applies to get clinical professor status, but on assessment, assessors think he or she qualifies as associate professor?
A couple things. We review your application when, well, we're on that right now, this slide I have up. Once you submit, our office is going to review your application and let you know if any documents need to be updated. We're also going to see if we see the reputation. So what I keep drilling in is that reputation. If we look at your CV and it's nice and neat and you've done a ton of things, but we see nothing outside of Cleveland Clinic or your local area, we're going to be emailing you and say, your packet looks great, but we're not seeing the reputation. Is there anything that you missed? Because we're not seeing it. So hopefully you've reviewed it. Maybe your chair's reviewed it to write your nomination letter, because, you know, your chair shouldn't be writing a nomination letter saying you have a reputation if you really don't. And again, reputation is not just doing great things at Cleveland Clinic. CASE wants you to take your knowledge and spread it around the world. They want to give appointments above entry level to people who have disseminated their knowledge to others. So once you get past yourself in the chair and then us, most likely you're going to pass the committee, but the committee is going to look for that reputation. And then they're going to say maybe that you don't get the appointment, or they think you're not ready and they may recommend the rank below it. If that happens, we would speak with you. And if you agreed, we would move you down to the lower rank and your application could proceed as normal. We would not have to get new letters or anything. What we can't do is go higher, but we can move you lower without redoing your application. But that doesn't happen that often. And mine and Tina and Bev's goal is for that not to happen, because it's work for you to put in your application. It's work for the referees to be kind enough to write a letter for you, because it takes at least an hour or two for them to write a nice letter. And we don't want everybody doing all that if you're not ready, because it's not fair to anybody. So we prefer that people be ready. And if you're not, we'll let you know what we think. All right, Tina, you got another one? That's it. Okay. All right. So after we check your application and we make sure everything looks great, we are going to begin requesting referee letters. You know, if we email you and say your CV's not up to par, you need to fix it, we can't do anything else. Your referees are going to get a copy of your CV. We're not going to send them a version we don't think looks good or has the correct information on it. So we can't move any farther until you get back to us. After you submit your application, you can no longer speak to your referees. It's in the requirements checklist that you are allowed to speak to your referees ahead of time. So you can say, Dr. Patel, I met you at a society meeting one time. I heard you lecture. You're in my field. Do you mind if I put you down as a colleague referee? I'm going to be applying for a faculty appointment or promotion soon. That's fine. You don't have to do that, but you can. Once you hit submit, you're done talking to them. If they email you and say, how come I didn't get a request yet? You refer them to us. If they say they want help writing their letter, you say, I can't. If they say, can you review my letter before I send it in? Say, no, I cannot do that. If they have any questions, like I lost my email, can I have another one? Say, please contact Faculty Affairs, or just email us and say, you know, Dr. Patel emailed me, he can't find his, the email request you sent, and we will resend it. But you're not allowed to talk to them and say, hey, did you write the letter or anything like that? All right, so that's what we're doing. Then the approval steps. So at Cleveland Clinic, Lerner College here, you can see for the lower two entry level ranks, we review them and we send them directly to CASE. Our one CAP committee looks at clinical assistant professor, but they don't, there's not a lot to look at. So they're just mostly sent directly to CASE. And we don't know how long it's going to take. Usually they don't take as long, the entry level ones, but you never know. Clinical associate professor and clinical professor, they require our committee, our clinical committee on appointments and promotions to review them and approve them. If they don't approve them, we could end up with an appeal situation. That doesn't happen very often, so I'm not going to go into it. But we need them to approve it. Then our office has to do some more paperwork to get it ready, and then we send it off to CASE. And we let you know, hey, it went to CASE today. And then we don't hear back from CASE until we get the final approval. So at CASE, all ranks need approval by their faculty affairs department and the School of Medicine dean. We can remind them like, hey, it's been 4 months and you still have Dr. Smith's application. We haven't heard anything. Is everything okay? But we cannot be contacting them monthly or anything like that, or letting you know anything because we just have too many applications to work on, and, and they're doing their process. If their process is taking too long, then we can contact them. But if you have any questions, email us. But that's the next approval steps. Average time frame are listed here. So the entry-level ones take less time and the higher ones take more time. You can look in your application. All you can see is if it went to case or not, or it's at the CCAP committee. Once it goes to case, they don't give us any updates until they send us your approval letter. Once we get your approval letter, in anywhere from a day to 3 days, we log it in and you get an automatic email saying you've been approved. And it is at that time that you can begin using your rank on your CV, on your letterhead. Remember, it's important to put the word clinical. If you apply for clinical associate professor and on your letterhead, you put you're an associate professor, that is incorrect and you should not do that. It is important to use the word clinical as a prefix because it shows the true rank you have received. If you were working on a true regular track associate professor, it could take almost 1.5 years to get approved. And there's much more requirements. So you have to make sure you use clinical in front of it. All right, transfers. There are people that move from Abu Dhabi to other Cleveland Clinic locations. And when they're at Abu Dhabi, they might be a consultant. And when they move to, say, Cleveland Clinic, Florida, they become a staff member. It doesn't matter, but if they move to another location, you have to let us know because we need to change things in the computer and you can keep your appointment. Now, if you happen to move from Abu Dhabi to, say, Florida, and now you're available to apply in the regular track, that's fine, you can. But you have to let us know you're going, because this is what'll happen. We get reports from Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi every month saying who's leaving. And the rules state that when you leave Cleveland Clinic, you terminate your appointment on that same day. And that's for every CCLCM appointment. If you're at main campus, it doesn't matter. The day you leave is the day it ends. So we'll have people leave Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi and start, say, at main campus 3 months later. Well, no one's told us, and we have information they left Abu Dhabi. And so within 6 months, we inactivate their appointment. And now they come to us like a year later and say, oh, I want to promote or something. And we're like, you don't have an appointment anymore. You should have told us. So email us right away if you're going to stay in the Cleveland Clinic system and move to another location, because then we will not inactivate your appointment. You may not actually have to transfer, but you still have to let us know so we know not to inactivate you. You can't transfer from other places, though. You can't say that I used to be at the University of London and now I want to transfer my associate professor to Lerner College of Medicine. You can't do that. You got to apply as a new appointment. We don't take transfers from outside our own institution. The final thing I wanted to mention was emeritus. Emeritus is only available in the clinical track. And these are not our rules. These are CASE's rules. And it's only available for the 3 ranks you see on the screen there. So if you're a clinical instructor for 10 years, those years did not apply to emeritus and you cannot get emeritus. Say you're a clinical instructor for 3 years and a clinical assistant professor for 7. That may add up to 10, but those clinical instructor 3 years did not count. So it has to be 10 years of ranks that are allowed to be counted. And you have to be 60 years of age and make meritorious contributions. There's a few other requirements. But if you ever get to where you're over 60 and have over 10 years with the college, then you ought to think of applying for emeritus before you retire from the Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. All right. I wanted to talk about faculty development as well. If you go to the, and you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint, you're going to be able to click on these links. There's faculty development at Case Western. This is the link to their programs. Some of the programs may not be available from Abu Dhabi. I do not know. If you're interested in one, you'd have to email the person in charge of that at Case. They do have a faculty toolkit series. These are recorded 1-hour Zoom sessions. Well, in the old days, they weren't Zoom, but they were still recorded. So these are on various topics that you can watch at your own leisure at home or at work. These are on the internet. You do not have to be on a Cleveland Clinic device to go to the Case site. And you can watch toolkit series. They have 2016 to present listed, at least 5 or 8 or 10 lectures a year. So there's quite a few to look at. And then because you're part of the Case family, you are able to network with fellow Case members. For CCLCM, Cleveland Clinic, you can visit our website to look at faculty development. This link will take you to our website that shows on opportunities that Dr. Mehta has to take courses. Again, I'm not sure if who's allowed to take them. That would be up to that department to decide, but you could visit this site to see it. Then there's also a listing on the Cleveland Clinic internet that we've put together of faculty development opportunities. Some are with the Education Institute at Cleveland Clinic. Some are just links to go to certain sites and read things, but there's a list. And then, of course, you can network with faculty members at CCLCM as well. And then I did want to bring up that we do have on the intranet, we have CCLCM templates. And if you have a faculty appointment, you're more than welcome to use them. So you're going to click on these links here. This one's going to take you to the Lerner College of Medicine letterhead template. So if you have an appointment, you can use our letterhead if you would like. PowerPoint templates. I'm using one today. I'm actually using a combination of Cleveland Clinic and Lerner College. And then there are scientific posters as well. So when you do have a faculty appointment and you're writing, say, a paper, you ought to put that, you know, it's once you have a faculty appointment, you shouldn't put that you're Cleveland Clinic. You should put that you're Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University. Because when you become a faculty, when you have an appointment, you agree to reference CCLCM of CWRU on your items that you publish. So you're definitely allowed to use our poster template if you would like. Okay, and that's it. I will take any more questions anybody has or any other information you would like.
We have one question right now. And while I have the floor, I do want to recognize Dr. Neary, Dr. Pierre Giorgio Neary. Dr. Neary serves on our CCAD committee. So we want to thank you for your service and thank you for being on today.
My great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes.
That is one committee that is at CCLCM that faculty members at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi are allowed to participate on. You need to be a clinical professor, and currently I believe the committee has enough members. I'm not sure, but we do email people when needed to ask them to serve on the committee. They're all volunteers. All our committees here and at Case are always volunteer. And it is something to list on your CV then under committee service.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Neary. And anyone else that is on, that serves on the CCAP committee. I apologize for missing you, but we thank you for your service.
Yes.
So the last question is, or the next question is, if you were assistant professor at CCLCM before while working at CCF, can you apply directly for clinical professor, or do you need to apply for clinical associate professor first?
Read the first part again. You currently have an appointment, or you lost, or it's gone?
You were assistant professor at CCLCM of CCF.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
but now I'm assuming you serve in Abu Dhabi. Can you apply directly for clinical professor, or do you need to apply first for clinical associate professor?
If it's a new appointment, and new appointments are changing ranks, changing tracks, or the first time you apply. So if you if you worked at Cleveland Clinic, say main campus, and you were an assistant professor, and you moved to Abu Dhabi and you're no longer a staff member, you're a consultant, we can just, you can email us and we can move your application, your appointment from assistant professor to clinical assistant professor. And then you would be in the clinical track where you should be, and then you would have to move up to clinical associate professor next. You could not skip.
But now, if the person had the established clinical associate professor regional reputation, or the clinical professor national reputation, and they're switching tracks, would they be able to apply directly for clinical associate professor or clinical professor? Because it's been 5 years since this person was assistant professor.
Right. It just, I mean, if they were assistant, it just depends. If they're transferring, they have to transfer at the same rank to go down. So if they were assistant professor, did that get canceled, or are they still it?
It wouldn't be, it seems as though it would be canceled because it's been 5 years.
So there was a different job in between. If there was a different job in between and it's not transferring, then you apply for whatever rank you're now qualified for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you're coming in as a new appointment, it's always you apply for what you're qualified for. We do get questions sometimes. I have a reputation. I've been a doctor for 20 years, but I'm new to CCLCM, so I must have to start at clinical assistant professor and work my way up. That is not true. You come in at whatever rank you're qualified for. Okay. All right. If you still want more clarification or more specifics, let me know.
Okay, we have another, let's see. As a clinical faculty at CCLCM, can we give seminars to students, residents, fellows, etc.? So
with any faculty appointment, no matter what the rank, you're allowed to lecture CCLCM or Case Western Reserve students. Residents and fellows are different. You don't need a faculty appointment for them because they're not part of the college, even though we'd still prefer you had one. But in order to do these lectures, you would have to talk to the people who would want you to do it. So if you go to our, I'll put it on the slides, but if you go to our website, we have a faculty role app. And I'll add that to one of the slides. And what you do is you click on this role app and it tells you if there's any openings at the college for teaching. And it tells you who used to teach it, who you can contact, ask questions, and you would have to see if you would be able to teach them even though you're in Abu Dhabi, like to make sure they're available virtually and all that. If you want to teach in a specific department at the hospital, that would be you contact that department. we would have nothing to do with that. So we get you the faculty appointment and we let you know if there's areas you can ask for opportunities, but we're not in charge of that. So I couldn't tell you if there was any openings to teach right now. You would have to talk to the leader of those lectures.
Okay, Dr. El Khalifa raised your hand.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you very much for such an awesome overview. That's really good. So my name is Shaib. I'm new here in Cleveland Clinic. I came from Manchester, and all my work is previously in Manchester. And currently, I'm associate professor in the University of Manchester. Now we've got a different role there. It's called honorary rather than clinical. So I'm kind of applying for this clinical professor, but everything from England. And the main problem I have here, immunologists have very few. So all my colleagues are dermatologists, rheumatologists, and other kind of specialty. Would that something will work, or you have to have an immunologist?
I mean, it's, if you think that they know enough that they could speak to your reputation and your specialty, then you could. But if, you know, a lot of times we get people that, not a lot, but a few times we get people who write us back and say, I don't feel comfortable writing this letter. I don't know enough about their specialty. That could be one of the reasons why we ask for more names. It just depends. But if you think they're going to be able to write about it, that's fine. But if you came from England, when you're at Cleveland Clinic London, Britain is considered regional. National would be considered all of the UK. So you would have to specify if you had like a reputation UK or international in your personal statement. I'm new to Abu Dhabi, but I already have this reputation.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you very much. I did not work in Cleveland Clinic London. I worked in Manchester, which is totally different. But yeah, I had a few national kind of roles I was doing there in the UK.
Right. You have to make sure it's enough to say that you have a national reputation, and anywhere working in England is only considered regional.
Got it.
So if you say I had a national reputation for England, that would only really be regional for our purposes.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Anyone else? You can put it in the chat or just start talking.
Hello, it's Pier Giorgio Neri here from Abu Dhabi. Can I?
Yes.
Just to clarify one thing, I mean, certainly, I mean, what Shuaib said is that, you know, he's an immunologist and here there are not so many, so he doesn't have possible peers who can, you know, write a recommendation letter or maybe but I would say that, I mean, if you are an oculopathologist and you collaborate with a pathologist and you want to become a clinical associate professor or clinical full professor or clinical professor, whatever, I believe that if you collaborate with a team and you make publications and you have a reputation that can be proven, I think there would be no problem to have a reference letter from another possible faculty member belonging to the Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi family. So the thing is this, is that I truly believe that, you know, there are metrics that can be very objective. Let's say if you have a tons of publications, I think that this is an international reputation in the peer-reviewed journals that can be another add on, and the reputation can be proven more easily. So I would say that we had this conversation before. So your reputation is made on invited lectures rather than possible peer-reviewed papers, because if you have an international association calling you out and telling, hey, I want to have you here because you are an expert in this field, that this can be a further proof. So I would say that everything has objective metrics. If you have more than 135 publications or whatever, I mean, it's an objective, you know, proof that you have an international reputation. And maybe lectures can be, you know, another point, but I would distinguish invited lectures from, you know, papers published in, you know, or maybe something that is, you know, proposed by the applicant, and then that person can go and then, you know, have the the lecture in that specific meeting. So I would say that there's a multiple factors intervening, and I believe that the committee is very fair, and we will try really to promote the ones who are, marking the different items and telling, yeah, this person is qualified. So I think that this can be one of the possible, reading, angles that can tell us, how an applicant should be.
Right. And for immunologists, it's national or international. You can choose these people. They're colleagues, so you could know them. So you could pick all outside names if you don't know anybody in Abu Dhabi yet. So you, like immunologists around the world, there must be 8 that you could choose that would write. The other thing I didn't bring up, and I'm going to add it to the PowerPoint before I send it up, is the primary area of excellence. When I keep talking about reputation, it's in your primary area of excellence. There's 3 primary areas. First one's professional service. Majority of the people are going to choose this. Professional service is not only clinical, but administrative. Now, it can't be all at Cleveland Clinic or, your location, because then that would be local. But we're talking professional service where you lecture on your clinical specialty, where you serve on committees, where maybe you're writing test questions for a fellowship exam, or you're on a national society for donor transplant, whatever it is. This is the way you're getting your reputation, is by being on committees and lecturing and that type of thing. Now, do we expect you to have 0 research? Probably not, but you don't have to have a ton of research if you pick professional service as your primary area. The other one is teaching. Not many people pick teaching because you need to be known for teaching. You need to have some of your lectures be about teaching, not just what to do with a pediatric diabetes patient, but how to train fellows on how to take care of a pediatric diabetes patient. So you're actually lecturing and known for your teaching. And then the final area is research. And most people don't pick research as their primary area because they weren't hired to do research all the time. Those are mostly people who work at the Lerner Research Institute and whose primary job is to do research all the time. They have parameters that they have to meet. But when you're applying, say, primary area of excellence and professional service, we still expect to see some teaching and maybe some research, but it doesn't have to be overwhelmingly. Your primary area, that's where your reputation is. So that's where we're looking at. So if your primary area of excellence is professional service, and maybe you should have a few more lectures or committees, but you have a ton of papers and you teach a lot and do things, that can kind of bolster your reputation and give you like a little more. But your reputation is in your primary area. So the committee's mostly looking at that because that's what you've chosen. Now, if you were in the regular track, you have to have 2 areas and it's harder. And tenured people at Case have to have all 3 areas. They have to be a rock star in, where, here we don't have to worry about that. All right, any other questions?
Dineen, do you mind if I say the last thing? And then I think that we're running out of time. And it's just to give it is an advice, is that, your ID card, when you want to apply, when I was tenure track professor before joining Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. So I know very well, how tough that is. And I can bring it on the table so that, the applicants can understand, how that is. The first ID card is the CV. So it's true that you have not a specific format, but if you write a CV that doesn't make sense and is not well structured, this is not a good ID card. If you have a super duper CV, but you don't get, how the CV is written, and you don't have the proof that, you have a reputation. Reputation is based on many different aspects, and I would suggest to pay attention to it. So there are little things that, for a committee member, since we don't receive only, something that belongs to the area, as you said, that we are expert on, I would really, stress the fact that you need to present something that, can show how committed you are to be an academic.
Thank you. That's very true. Very true. Yeah, some of the CVs we get are less than ideal. Definitely we don't have a lot in the requirements worksheet about it, but we have some, but it's really just being neat and easy to follow. And you can use our template as a reference guide of what to include. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Karani. You're muted.
Oh, yes. Hello, Deneen, Beverly. I'm glad Dr. Neri could join us as well. On behalf of the WEPSA group, I really wanted to thank you, first of all, for taking the time to share all your knowledge about the application. This has been a very informative session. I think you're going to see a lot of applications come your way, and I hope there'll be a lot of WEPSA members amongst them. So I wanted to really thank you for your time and for this wonderful session.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. I will send you the recording. I'm probably going to get the beginning of it taken off to make it when we first started. And then I'll email you with information you can send to everybody. And you can share this lecture with new people that are coming on board at CCAD, and that'll give them some more information on how to apply. All right. Well, if any other questions, always email Faculty Affairs CCLCM@ccf.org. And thank you, and have a wonderful evening. And we'll get back to work now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much, and hope you have a wonderful day now. Thank you.
Thank you.